Okay. So happy to see everybody. So glad to be here tonight and so excited to talk to Rick about Maskirovka. Yeah, I have a little cheat sheet over here just says Maskirovka. I just did my review. I've been meaning to for a couple of days of the book, and I felt so smart reading this book because it is really not uh, a book I would normally reach for. I bought it actually for my husband who loves history and geopolitics and all that kind of stuff. It's not really necessarily what I would go for first, but it was laying by the bedside table and I flipped and read a couple of chapters and I was hooked. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful story. So don't be scared because you can't pronounce its name, because most of us have little cheat sheets for how to pronounce the name. But behind the name lurks a wonderful book. So we're going to talk tonight with Richard Meredith, and we're going to start with your third book, Maskirovka. Maskirovka, the Russian Science of Deception. And I'm going to set it up by reading to you from I think this is on the back cover. It may have changed its name, but the KGB is up to its old tricks, only this time with a new puppet, the American public. Steve Wynn, a newly minted homicide detective with the San Francisco Police Department, is cut loose on his first solo case, the mysterious death of a young accountant with a public interest foundation. Everything points to natural causes, but Wynn, to the dismay of his chief, isn't ready to close the book. With no motive, means, or opportunity, the anxiety-racked law school dropout starts digging anyway. Wynn's torturous investigation leads through the halls of Congress, the gritty oil fields of the Siberian tundra, stately Black Sea palaces of the Petro Czars, and the mean streets of San Francisco. Aided by his misfit cousin, Tina No, an attorney with a special practice in federal law. I know all about that now, if any of you ever want to know about federal law. And Tommy Tran, a computer geek straddling the tightrope of legality, Wynn unearths a malevolent alliance among a billionaire Russian oligarch, a duplicitous foundation director, and a renowned philanthropist hell-bent on tightening Russia's monopoly on the European energy market by choking off American exports. If it means corrupting the American electoral system through illegal campaign contributions, political blackmail, and a few dead bodies, so be it. In this dark world of Russian deception, Wynn unravels a complex tangle of illegal offshore accounts, shell corporations, and front companies, all while ducking the crosshairs of the SVR's most skilled assassins. He may solve a murder and maybe save a republic. Well, okay, this is light years away from Karen Phillips' books, A Deadly Combo, at our last Meet the Author. So welcome, Richard. Thanks for joining us tonight. And congratulations on Maskirovka making it to the top 20 finalists for the Reader's Choice Award at Killer Nashville Conference. Winning would be great, but making the top 20 isn't too shabby. So
pretty pleased about that. Thank you very much, Penny. But you kind of gave my whole book away, so I think we're done now, right?
No. We're going to start off talking about Richard. I mean, we could spend the hour and a half just talking about him, but I promise I will save some time for the book. So let me tell you a little bit about Richard Meredith. Born in Flint, Michigan, served in the U.S. Navy, worked as a marine scientist and a wildlife biologist for the federal government and the private sector. His newest novel, Maskirovka, was published in October 2022 and received a starred review for Kirkus Reviews. His first novel, Skydance, was based on his environmental work in the oil fields of Ecuador. His thriller, The Crow's Nest, draws heavily on his work above commercial tuna seiners, and marine research vessels in the Pacific Ocean, and won the Silver Falcon Award for Best Action Adventure Novel at the 2021 Killer Nashville Mystery Thriller and Suspense Writers Conference. When not writing, he enjoys travel, bird and wildlife watching, scuba diving, guitars, rock concerts, and most sports. Okay, so Richard, when you were a kid, what did you see yourself doing as an adult? Was
Oh, I was
writing and reading it?
no, I was going to play pro baseball.
Oh,
But in high school, I met this left-hand curveball pitcher, and that kind of took care of that for me. So I had to find something else to do. No,
so
but I wasn't much of a reader as a kid. In fact, I'd only read, sports books and, school assignments when I had to. But what actually started me reading seriously and long-term was a story I think some people have heard before, but I was bored on a Sunday afternoon, and my folks were gone somewhere. I got on the bus in Flint and went downtown. We had two theaters downtown. One was playing, Capitol was playing something and didn't look interesting. Another one was Palace Theater. I went over there and they were playing this movie called From Russia with Love. And, I never heard of James Bond, Ian Fleming at all. And I watched that movie and I was just awestruck. And on the way home, I'm at the Woolworths at the bus stop, and I went in there and there was this whole rack of James Bond novels by Ian Fleming, and I kind of recognized it from the movie. And so that's what I spent my whole summer with, reading that series of books. And that's what got me going right there.
so we owe your passion of writing to James Bond, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Shaken, not stirred.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
when did writing become a passion?
Well, I was always writing, but it was usually technical, scientific things. I never got, and it was so boring. You couldn't have any flowery language. It had to be all objective. So I started just about 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, I just started putting little paragraphs together, wondering, if I could put something together. And it just kind of, I got a storyline from one of my old jobs when I was working in Ecuador. And I thought, I was on this project. We were doing this, exploring for a pipeline route, and it was through the Amazon rainforest. And I was slogging through these marshes with boots that were two sizes too small, and sleeping in these little tent camps, with, crickets and all kinds of insects keeping me, and howler monkeys keeping me awake all night. And, just that whole adventure in the jungle. And I said, someone ought to write a book about this. And then later on, I thought, well, that is a pretty good life experience. I might as well try that. So I used just that setting and my experience there, and then I put it to a whole different story about a kidnapping in the jungle.
So the passion came after you started writing.
Yeah, I mean, once you get going, it's once you get the itch, you have to scratch.
Well, I think that's a needlepoint that we should have done and sell in the Capitol Crimes bookstore. Once you get the itch, you have to scratch. So, Richard, writing for you is a second act. Many writers don't get time to write until later in life. So, do you think, is it ever too late to start a writing career?
No, I think age is actually a plus, because I draw on my life experiences, and I've got a cache now of experiences I can go on. And I think you meet more people, you get more experiences, and I think that's where you draw your stories, is from your life.
Yeah. All right. So those newbies out there, they haven't lived enough yet to have a whole lot to write about it.
That's what I wonder. These young people writing these grandiose novels. I said, well, they've got a good imagination. I have to base mine partially on on experience.
So what advice would you give the writer just starting out?
Write. I don't care if it's on a Post-it, on a computer, on a notebook. Just write, and just don't be afraid to turn it to somebody else, to have them review it and critique it, because it's a skill you develop, and you have to learn the tricks. And for me, I think that the critical thing was actually Capitol Crimes. I was taking a class I was at a meeting, and Michelle Dreyer was saying, well, she's starting up this class. So I took the class, and Karen was in it, and Linda Markham, and that evolved into a critique group. And I think just you learn the techniques from the people that know how to do it. And I think so. Find a group that you're comfortable with and write with, and read. When you're not writing, read.
Reading and writing. So you were saying when we talked earlier, you said from Michelle, you learned we are not writers, but rewriters.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
You know, I tend to go through and probably each book's probably 7, 8, 9 drafts. And it's never what I envisioned in the beginning. It evolves. There's something when that, like I've said before, I said, you know, writing for me is the hardest thing to start, the easiest thing to quit, but it's so much fun in between because your mind is somewhere else and it takes the story, takes its own life, you know, and you don't know how it happens, but it just does.
Mm.
So and I'm sure this is the same with everyone else's, right? That, you know, chapters move around, the plot moves around, you know, sometimes my last chapter, it becomes my first chapter, and the middle chapter, it's puzzle pieces you move around to make a story.
And we've talked about of your book taking the top prize at Killer Nashville, and we've got Botchacom looming in the future coming down the pike. What roles do conferences? I mean, a lot of new writers feel like, why should I go to a conference? I don't have a book. I don't know anybody. I don't, you know, what role do you feel attending conferences plays for writers, especially just starting out?
Well, misery loves company, and you get a bunch of friends. No, I think it's invaluable because first of all, you get to go to all the lectures, you know, and you get to have, you can, you know, for a very, you know, inexpensive price, you can have reviewers look at your work, editors and agents to take a look at your work, and you meet people. I probably at one Capitol Crimes conference and then one Killer Nashville, I got 2 or 3 people that would write me blurbs on my books from doing that. So, and you meet people, and that's how you exchange ideas and you see how they do things. So I think it's just really it's a professional development. And I think, you know, you have to look at it that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's interesting because one of the hardest things I think is to stop thinking of writing as a avocation and thinking of it as a vocation, thinking of it as a job. It's like a real job.
Yeah.
And in a real job, you would go to professional development opportunities often. It would be expected. And as writers, I think I've never thought of the conferences that way, but you're right. Those are our opportunities to polish our craft, meet others, meet like minds. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And they're a lot
So
of fun too.
yeah, that's the secret. It really is a lot of fun. You don't sleep much, but you do have a lot of you do have a good time. You really do.
Yeah.
So okay, so Richard, what helps you get a book to the finish line? When you start, you sit down and you've got that blank computer screen or tablet or what have you in front of you. How do you get from there to the end?
Well, I think I think that I've got a semi-finished story, and then you give it to your beta readers or your critique group, and have them go through it. And I've got a set of people that will give me their honest opinion. It's just, you know, they let me know when something's wrong. Like in that critique group, when Michelle and Linda and Karen, when I saw 3 eye rolls, I said, I got to change that. That's not working too well, you know. So I think once it goes through the beta, then I think, well, you know, here's what I can work on. And, you know, I go through a couple of rounds like that. Then I figure that now it's getting close to, I want to start sending it out.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So now you've written the end. For you, what happened next?
Oh, that is a bit. Well, I've got a spreadsheet of about, oh, I don't know, 200, 300 agents, small publishers, big publishers. And most of the columns say, the one column says reject, 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 reject. So my last book, The Crow's Nest, I found a small publisher. And you know, small publisher, they do most of the work and you do all the marketing, you know. And this time around, I thought, well, you know, I was going to try. I had an agent, and he liked my book. He liked Maskirovka. It was under a different title at that point. So he was the first agent I had. We had a year-long contract, but he couldn't sell it. So after a year, I said, well, I'm gonna see if I can get it to a small publisher. But in this case, that was when I took a gamble. I said, why don't I just said I needed to have a gut check. I needed to have, it was really, where was it? So I sent it to Kirkus Reviews, and that's, expecting that I'm going to get kind of a, to tell me what is, some mediocre or whatever. And it came back with a starred review. So then I took that to the publisher. Hey, it's got this review. What do you think? And he said, okay, let's go with it. So I think after you're done, it's for me, I don't have an agent, and I had a couple of small publishers. So for me, then you start working to try to get it, published.
Okay. All righty. So, all right. So now I think I've wrung everything out of you I can. I guess we better talk about the book.
Okay.
Okay. So as genres go, how would you describe Maskirovka?
Well, as I said, I call it a genre cocktail because it's 1 part murder mystery, 2 part spy thriller, and then a dash of police procedural thrown in. And it's that's what it is. It's a mixed genre, and it's hard to cap because it really is a murder mystery, but there's a lot of other things going on around that murder. A couple murders actually, but
I noticed, and for me this was kind of unusual. You have very short chapters, but they make the story move that much faster because the action never stops because you have these little short chapters. So would you be willing to read a little to us from Maskirovka?
I would love to, but I wish Terry Shepard was here
Why?
to do the reading.
Oh, no. I mean, Terry has a lovely voice, but you do. Nobody reads work as well as you read your own work, I think.
Yeah, well, let me do the first 3 chapters because it kind of introduces the story and the principal characters.
Okay.
So let's see here. So chapter 1, apartment of Lucas Miller, San Francisco, present day. The window filtered the harsh floodlights reflecting off Coit Tower to a soft, almost alpenglow warmth. Were a witness present, there was just enough light to see the soulless curl of the lips. Not a smile, but satisfaction. Secret death, one without means or motive, was most challenging, yet somehow most fulfilling. The assassin gazed at the body through vacuous eyes of blue ice, almost as lifeless as those staring back from the bed. There was no remorse, no guilt, nothing. Empathy was wrenched from the killer's conscience years before. Under the ceiling vent, a quick jab with a pocket knife punctured the Mylar balloon. Delicate fingers coaxed it through the grate. The same with the balloon on the floor register. A rush of air streamed across the assassin's face, but this time the balloon slipped away. One last survey of the cold room and out the bedroom door. Kauka grabbed the tank and slipped unseen from the dead man's apartment. Soiled coveralls, a baseball cap, and a tool bag. Simple, banal. It was a lethal gift. Invisibility, anonymity. Few noticed, no one remembered. A call to the DACA was expected. Chapter 2, the mean streets of San Francisco. From 200 feet, the scene seemed to unfold in slow motion. Damn, was all Steve Wynn could say. The man, maybe even a teenager, but a big one, cold-cocked the woman, ripping a purse from her arm, a phone from her grip, and toppling her face first to the concrete. In running gear and exhausted after sucking sour city fumes on a 3-mile run over steep streets, the rookie detective wanted nothing more than to duck and cover as the perp sprinted his way. The thief approached and set a menacing gaze on Wynn. He must have figured at 6 inches shorter and 50 pounds lighter, the slight man posed no threat. In fact, the thug barely altered his escape route as Wynn, feigning fear, averted his eyes. At 10 feet, Wynn adjusted his path a fraction. As the thief was about to pass, Wynn bent his right arm and a microsecond later unleashed a brutal forearm shiver to the man's throat. The assailant's eyes ballooned as a jolt threw him back 5 feet. Wynn jumped on the dazed man and smashed his cell phone into his nose. In the next moment, the perp was on the ground gasping as Wynn straddled his chest. Hunched over his walker, a man at the bus stop laughed in delight as he shuffled on wobbly wheels toward Wynn. That was the best takedown ever. Wynn looked up at giant eyes peering through thick bifocals. then to what remained of his cell phone on the ground. You got a phone? Yeah, sure. Call 911. Tell them we had a 245. Send an ambulance. Officer needs assistance. Yeah, 911. Ambulance 245. You a cop? Detective, please call. You bet. He rolled his walker to the side. Mind if I kick him in the balls just once? Call. The thief wheezed and struggled back to buck Wynn. Wynn slammed a forearm into the man's chest and squeezed a tender nerve under the perp's collarbone until he screamed. Here's the deal. You lay still, I'll stop. Otherwise, it'll only get worse. Wynn caught the eye of the older man. They're on their way, officer. If the patrolman jammed the gas, hurtling the cuffed thief against the steel-barred window, but not before he fixed a fierce stare at Wynn. The crowd cleared and Wynn sat alone at the curb, cold and teeth chattering from acute adrenaline withdrawal. You idiot, he could have killed you. It was another 5 minutes before the weak-kneed detective struggled to stand, and a greater fear struck. He had to return and face the squad. Wynn, in my office now, Lieutenant Joe Morris, Chief of Homicide Division, yelled across the bullpen. Startled, Wynn looked up and pointed at the phone pressed against his cheek. Slow rollers churned in his gut. Breathe, he urged himself as he crossed the bullpen. Morris's office was cramped and cluttered, a purge of accumulated flotsam long overdue. The confined space made the former defensive lineman appear even larger. Sorry, Chief, Bilski got me on phone duty. What's up? Wynn asked. The lieutenant rubbed his right hand across his bald scalp. Wynn hid his amusement at the contrast between the man before him and the photograph on the wall of Morris sporting a full afro on his first undercover assignment. It was like he was bragging. Yeah, I was young once and had hair. I heard about your arrest today. What do you think? You're still on patrol? Wrong place, wrong time. No, the patrol sergeant said it was a righteous collar, but he needs your report. Said a bystander reported you tackled the perp. The big chief got a little note from a Miss Howard. Over his reading glasses, Morris cast a quizzical glance at Wynn. The Vic, I take it. Anyway, he sends his regards. Seems Miss Howard is a friend of his daughter. A huge smile crossed his boss's face. You really tackle him? I love it. When I played, the little cornerbacks had the biggest stings. You didn't draw your weapon? Wynn's eyes fell to the floor. In my desk, I was on a training run, no place to. Morris leaned back and interrupted. I've never known a cop with such an aversion to his service weapon. My phone worked pretty well, but I'm going to need a new one. Morris laughed. I'll give you style points for creativity, but use your weapon. It's your lifeline. Learn to live with it. While we're on the subject, I saw your quals at the range. Pretty lame. I passed. Barely. How about putting in a little more time? The armorer is a retired pal of mine, a great coach. I know it's my Achilles heel, I guess. Something about relaxing when I know that thing's going to explode in my face. I tense up. Morris's easy smile was almost lost in his street-scarred stare. You ain't the first. It's a matter of training, repetition. You'll get it. If not, there's a raft of positions opening up in traffic. You'd look kind of cute on one of those little scooters handing out parking tickets to the tourists. It wasn't the pep talk that Wynn needed. Chapter 3. The Surgov Dacha outside Moscow, Russian Federation. Patience was the one virtue Anatoly Surgov cultivated. Time was the measure of success, and the longer a plant took to flower, the more satisfying the fruit. But today was different. Muddled brows drawn tight, he stared at the phone, conjuring a ring. Tapping his finger on the rough-hewn desk, returned his thoughts to the day his father felled the ancient larch. Tears welled in the young boy's eyes as a giant yielded to the axe. His father's thick, sweaty arms draped on his shoulders. I promise you, my son, it will live a new life. Always remember, the land will provide. The aged and battered wood desk stood testament to his father's words. On the second ring, Surgov lifted the phone from its cradle. Alex, Colonel Surgov, it is done. A silent sigh and a furtive smile. Very good. Accident? Natural causes. Surgov needed no further explanation. Where are you now? Still in California. Good. The woman? Awaiting your instructions. Hold for now. Surgov hung up and rose from the desk. There were few people he trusted since the breakup of the Soviet Union, and one of them was Alexei Zarov. Ever since that day in the remote mountains in Afghanistan almost 30 years ago when Alex saved his helicopter crew, the fate of both men was inextricably entwined. Alex became Surgov's protege at the Soviet Army, then the KGB and the Foreign Intelligence Service, SVR, and now in their new enterprise. Through the frosted windows of the small dacha, Sergov gazed at the snow-encrusted pines surrounding the property. While his fortune afforded him a luxury penthouse in Moscow and a winter palace on the Black Sea, and apartments and homes throughout Europe and North America, it was a small, primitive cabin inherited from his father where he retreated, where he could truly relax, where everyone save Alex knew not to bother him. Even his bodyguards were dismissed once he arrived. Except for Valentina, his cook, and Zelka, his ever-vigilant sheepdog, he was alone. His nerves on edge that morning as he awaited the call, he busied himself splitting a fallen spruce. Zelka had another chance to patrol. The poor girl tried her hardest to guard the property, but seldom did she encounter even a squirrel or a chipmunk, and those only elicited the mildest bark. She once caught the fading scent of a fox, but the chase was fruitless. Sergov prayed she would never tangle with a wolf pack. Retreat was not in her heart. His attention returned to the window. The sun was still bright, at least 3 hours before dusk, more than enough time to stack wood. Donning a thick coat over his short, well-fed frame, he wrapped a heavy woolen scarf around his neck and cinched the ermine-lined hood. Though technically fall, the temperature hovered just above freezing. Sprawled across the hearth, drawing the last bit of warmth from ebbing embers, Zelka opened a single eye to investigate the commotion. "Come on, girl, time to work." She rocketed to his side, tongue lapping, ears at full alert. The early snow around the dacha was well tamped, but still crunched under his boots. It was a constant battle, but he kept the path cleared to the small barn and woodshed. His father, a decorated general in the Soviet army, demanded the young Sergov and his older brother keep the trail open. "We may need an escape route," he teased. The boys spent hours shoveling. It was the hard labor of the dacha and their hunting forays for a deer or two each winter that bonded father to son and brother to brother. Both were now gone, but he carried on. Regardless of his wealth, there was no escaping the chores of the forest and garden. As the sun fell below the trees, the pair returned to the sage and juniper drifting from the kitchen. "Ah, sweet Valentina, my favorite." No amount of foie gras, caviar, or truffles could supplant the earthy brew of venison, potatoes, and turnips. "It will be ready in 10 minutes, Colonel." He sat on the wooden bench, replacing his boots with slippers. The relief from Alex's call was short. The angst returned. A glance at his watch. 5:30, 6:30 a.m. in San Francisco. Sergov shook his head. The Americans. The hate in his heart was betrayed by his calm expression. Another waft of the stew. The call could wait. So that's the first 3 chapters, and introduce us.
And it was really nice because it kind of set the whole thing up. Once you got through those first 3 chapters, you'd been to 3 different locales, and you kind of had an idea of you've met all of the players. You've met all the players, and it's really good. So when did you start writing the book?
I think it was about 2016. I think I started it, the idea, because I'd seen a couple of articles that kind of cued me into it, and I was going to kind of show you those, and they were. Let's see if I can we screen share here.
Sure.
Let's see. I guess I've got screen share. I don't know if I've got it or not. Let's see.
Do you have to make there we go.
There, can you see that? Is that showing up now?
Yeah.
This is an article from the New York Times. Are you seeing that? I can't tell.
We've got part of it is our questions from you to me, and then in the middle it's got the Russian money suspected behind fracking protests. So is there any way to make that? Yeah, you got rid of that. Make the other one a little bigger if you can.
Let's see. I got to move this over here.
Yeah, good.
Is that showing up okay there?
Yeah.
So that's one. That was from the Russian money suspected behind fracking protests. So that was one of the. And there was another one here. Let's see. Which one is this one? Move this one over. You can tell I'm not really good with these graphics on it. This is from the McClatchy paper about the Russian trolls post-election task disrupt Florida and other U.S. energy pipelines, which is again funded by the Russians. And then there's a third one here from Newsweek about Putin funding green groups to discredit natural gas fracking in the U.S., all for the purpose of for them maintaining the their stranglehold on the European oil market. And let's see. Now, how do I get out of that? Stop sharing. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So those were I'd seen those articles, and from that I thought there's a story in there somewhere, and so I made it a murder mystery, and I because I was trying to I wanted to get a series going up with a detective, and San Francisco was a logical place because it's got so much family and friends there. And so that was the germ of the idea right there.
And did the talk of Russian interference with the election play into your ideas for the book at all?
No, that was actually before the term Russian collusion was even on anybody's lips, and it was well before anyone thought that there could be a ground war in Ukraine. It was all prior to that. That all just happened just while I was writing the book, and I was trying to get that in there because, as the book explains, that there are the Yamal Peninsula in Russia is where they produce their oil, and all those go through about 5 pipelines through Ukraine into Eastern Europe, except for the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, which go to the Baltic into Germany. So that's why it's such a crucial corridor that Putin's always had his eyes on.
Right. Karen asked if you have ever traveled to Russia, or if not, do you want to?
I have not. I've got as close as the Ukraine border in Poland, and I was in Lithuania talking to some Russian expats. My wife Carol has been to Moscow and St. Petersburg with some friends of ours, and back then I would have gone. I don't think I'll go now. I may have a target
on your back. Yeah, yeah. Donna had asked about your sources of research for Maskirovka. Donna, did Rick answer your questions about that, or would you like more details about his sources of research? You can.
Penny?
Yeah.
You asked me a question.
I just said your question was, what was Rick's sources of research for Maskirovka? And I'm wondering if you felt that was adequately answered, or if you needed any follow-up.
No, I think he did a good job of explaining. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It was a highly complex novel.
Yes.
And there were like 14 points of view. So it was a real challenge to read and to keep everything sorted out, all the characters, but it was really interesting and all in encompassing view of global money laundering schemes. It really opened my eyes to what goes on, with the powers that be, who are corrupt and who have the money to launder their nefarious income streams.
Yeah, that was the fun part for me, was trying to figure out how you can actually get money, into the U.S. political system. And there's a big loophole with some of these public interest foundations, because they report the money that's coming in, and not necessarily who the source is, but whoever they donate to has to say where they got the money from, but that was from the foundation. So there's kind of a do loop in there that's exploitable.
Yeah. Dover asked, what was the most significant change you made to the plot during edits, and how did you come up with that solution?
The biggest thing was I changed the assassin. And if they haven't read the book, I don't really want to say too much more about it, but it was not who they thought it was in the beginning, but yeah.
Right.
In the first chapter, I just mentioned that there were fragile fingers or, delicate fingers. I won't say
And-
any more than that.
Okay, because we don't want to do any spoilers. You all want to read this. This is a wonderful, wonderful story. Michael Brandt says, can you address the history of Maskirovka's beginnings?
Oh, well, it was a term, the Soviets during World War II had a whole system of deception, as the Allies did too. But that's where the term evolved from, was how they're during World War II, their deception, measures. And I kept looking for a right word for it, and I couldn't find a word that would really kind of capture it. That was, so I thought, well, I'll use that word. I'll just adopt that, and it's because it's the science of deception, but I'm using it in a different context now.
Okay,
But
yeah.
it satisfied a couple things for me, because you knew right away that it had a Russian involvement in it, and then so.
And Patty asks, what was your hardest scene to write and why?
I think the hardest. I think it was Steve going through one of his panic episodes, trying to describe his angst and all his, everything's going on with him. It was just that was really hard. It was hard to, put down in words what he was going through. But
Yeah, that I loved I love characters who have some human flaws. And there seems to be a lot of storylines that have characters with social anxiety, or who are on this autistic spectrum, or things like this. And I love that you made him so human, so normal. Because right now there seems to be this tendency to want to take, I know that when we used to talk about it with the senses, if a person was blind, then their other senses were heightened. So now if a person is on the autistic spectrum, somehow they have these other abilities, almost taking them to the level of superpowers. I mean, it's on The Good Doctor, he kind of drifts off into space and suddenly he has the answer. But for Steve, I didn't get that. I didn't get this sense of the superpower born out of his anxiety, just all of the uncomfortableness and the pain of that anxiety.
for him, it's a hurdle.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
it wasn't an asset at all.
Don't you think that that's true I mean, okay, so do you share any anxiety issues with your main character, like Steve Wen? Is that something you
When I have to
share?
give an interview?
Mhm.
No, I don't, but I have got close family and friends that have, and I've always found it totally fascinating, that how they negotiate through and adapt to the situations and their techniques for resolving issues, and not and things that will actually trigger a panic attack. And because in the story with Steve is that, he's you got to have a brilliant detective. He's got to be brilliant. But he starts law school very young. But the problem is, when he gets called on in class, he freezes up and he can't talk. He just goes into a panic mode. So he knows he can't do that. So I thought, well, you can't talk in law school. What would be the worst? What would be the toughest situation you could put him in? Make him a cop. So then, how does he cope? And what coping mechanisms is he taught? And goes into his cousin Tina, who's really kind of his wing person. Gets him through most things, but she's at the end of her line, so she gets a psychologist friend, and so he starts seeing a psychologist. He wants to go to she wants him to go to the department psychologist, but he doesn't want to because he's afraid that word will get out, and they'll think he's got some kind of disability, and he also thinks that if he takes any medication, then it'll be used against him if he ever has to testify in court. So he's trying to do things kind of on the sly. And the
You did
question came up with one of my technical consultants on the story. She said, do you think they would have caught that in the interview, that he's got this social anxiety disorder? So I had to make a way that, they didn't test him necessarily for that. They tested him for something else, whether or not he was a psychopath or a sociopath, that would not necessarily be an anxiety disorder. So,
Well, and you did a really good job of painting a picture for us of how, not only how he functions in the world, but how he has set up parameters. I mean, obviously, he's a good detective. He's good doing police work. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone from patrol to being a detective in a short amount of time. And, by saying, he doesn't feel the anxiety when he's talking with a bad guy, because he doesn't care what the bad guy thinks about him.
right.
It's only people that matter
Yeah.
that raises up his anxiety. So you've created a barrier that makes us understand how he is able to be quite good at his job, at the same time have this almost debilitating social anxiety that
Yeah.
gets in his way. I think he's awesome. I love this character. I
Well, see him
really
again.
do. Well, okay. So about that, yeah. Are we going to see him again?
Well, I mean, I've got another book right now that's done, and he's in it. And, then I got another book that I'm a third of the way, or maybe halfway through, that he's in. So I'm trying for a trifecta here, at least have a 3-part series. So.
Oh wow. Okay, so Steve will be back. This is great news. Those of you who haven't read it, you have to read it so you know why we're excited that Steve's coming back. But we're excited that Steve's coming back. I wanted to ask, why did you choose the protagonist to be the child of Vietnamese refugees?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, it's I think because there were these 2 women who used to do, I used to go to get my hair cut, and they had this hair salon here on Broadway. And their parents had come from Vietnam during after the war, and they settled here. And then my wife had worked with a couple of people, that actually a nail person, and they would tell their stories. And this one woman, she had came here, and they had nothing, and the husband worked 3 jobs, and she worked a couple of jobs, and they got one kid ended up in dental school, one became a CPA, and one became a lawyer, and coming from nothing, and that was a story. I'd always liked that story of coming from nothing to something, and I thought, well, here's the latest chapter.
Incarnation.
Yeah.
Incarnation. It is amazing, because I think most Americans don't see the rags to riches potential that still exists in America,
Yeah.
but immigrants do.
That's why they're coming.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's why they're coming.
They still believe they can start as the janitor and end up running the company.
Yeah.
And so, for that hope and the possibility of that, it's the South Pacific concept. You got to have a dream. If you don't have a dream, how you going to have a dream come true? And I think many immigrants come here with the dream.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the hardest things for us as Americans is that many of us have seen the dream tainted so many times that we no longer can believe in it anymore.
Yeah. But then you just have to see but it's all around us. So if we just look, there's those people that are doing it, they're doing
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's like they may work, 120 hours a week, but they'll get it done. Their kids will they're going to push their kids into it, So.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's part of it, is what it takes, deciding that this is where I'm going, no matter what.
Yeah.
No matter what it takes, no matter no matter, you're gonna have a good time. I don't care who I have to kill. This is what's going to happen. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and that drive that is still there so often. So I was curious about that. So I asked you what you haven't done yet that you still want to do, and what did you say?
I want to be on a bestseller list. Is that too much to ask?
I don't think so. I
I mean, what's the
absolutely.
1 in a billion chance, what the heck?
I mean, I don't think that's too much to ask at all, Rick.
Yeah.
So, Karen says you'll be there.
Oh, thank you, Karen.
Sarah says, did you come up with Steve? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? So, which came first, Steve or the Russian part? And how did you know the two could go together?
Wow, that's a good question. I think I had this. I think I had the idea for the Russian, infiltrating the country, and then I think Steve came after. I think, but I'm actually not sure now. I'll look at my early drafts. There are about 40 of them.
So you had the idea, the idea for the Russian involvement.
Yeah, and I started populating it with how do I get that into and I shoehorned the murder in there, and then
Okay, so I can't let you go without asking, plotter or pantser?
and I think my answer is I'm a plotter. I just got to work my way through. I'm actually kind of a not lazy, but I go about 2 or 3 hours and I'm done. I can't do much more than that. Then I have to do kind of busy work, and I can only do it 2 or 3 days a week. I know some people can just do it 8 hours a day, and I just can't do that. And I'm actually more of a pantser, but because I have an outline in my head, but it's not on paper, and I'm not really sure. And it changes so much that I don't think an outline would do me much good, other than maybe as a starting point. But I actually have my starting. I guess I'm kind of in that way because I'll have little Post-its all over the place, and those are kind of what I'm thinking about. But that's not really an outline. It's just kind of ideas. So I guess pantser, plotter,
Combination of the two.
Hybrid.
Oh, Dover says when Clancy wrote Red October, he got visited by the MIB because they couldn't figure out how his info was so accurate.
Yeah.
Have you been visited because of your intuition on this?
No. I think there's enough fiction in there that they know it.
Do you find yourself looking over your shoulder and seeing if there are any strange people, any strange Mercedes following you or following you along the way?
I'm always hoping for something exciting to happen.
Well, because as we know, if something exciting happens, it ends up being fodder for the next book.
Exactly. Yeah, something to write about.
So, is there any possibility of without giving too much away, is there any possibility of a love interest for Stephen in the next couple of books?
Yes, and you're introduced to her in this book, and it's unrequited so far. Well, let me put it this way. At the end of this book, he has a love interest. It just doesn't last. Okay, and then he picks up his real. Well, yeah. So there's a woman that's introduced in Maskirovka. I'll just say that she's the criminalist in the lab, and he's always has eyes for her. And he gets closer. He gets closer in the second book, but it's still unrequited love. So.
Oh, I see. I know who he's talking about, but you're going to have to read the book to find out. But I'm excited at the idea that something could heat up between these two.
Yeah,
I really am because I again, in painting this full character, you can imagine if talking with his office mates is very, very difficult. for Steve. The idea of a romantic interest would make it even more difficult. I mean, how complicated would your life be trying to juggle the world with social anxiety?
I mean, I'm sweaty. I mean, back in the day, I was sweaty palms asking anyone, approaching anyone to go out, so just amplify that times 100, so.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So that's good, Karen. That's good, Karen. All right. So do I have any more questions out there? Have I hit everything? Oh, somebody says, since I haven't read the book, are there any good Russians in it? Hmm,
Oh, interesting.
that's a good question. Are there any good Russians? I have some empathy towards some of the Russians. Even the bad Russians, I kind of understand where they're coming from, but would you
Yeah.
describe them as good Russians?
I would say that they're patriotic Russians. They think it's almost like the noble cause corruption issue, it's like doing ends justify the means. They'll do anything they think to get to their, get to what they want to do, because they in their mind, because 70% of their economy is based on oil exports. They do not want competition. They think anything that interferes with that to them is, an existential threat to their survival.
Right.
So I think I explained their motivation, but again, I don't think it justifies what they do. But it's a moral decision.
Mhm.
But there's only really, let's see, I'm counting the Russians. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's probably only 4 in the story, and they all have. I guess none of them are really what you'd call a protagonist or a good guy, but they're let's just say there's a lot of gray. Yeah.
I could see that. I could go with that. Yeah. But I personally, I like a book that doesn't have black and white characters, good or bad characters. I think it's really hard for a writer to write them and have them not end up being cookie cutter or stereotypes of not quite real,
Yeah.
And so I think just like a character with flaws is far more interesting to me as a reader than the character that has it all together, who I haven't met in real life yet. Um, a bad guy. I mean, the minute they come on the scene, you go, this is a bad guy.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with sick puppies. There are sick puppies, and when they come into the store, you go, now that's a sick puppy.
Yeah.
And there's no redeeming for this guy.
Yeah.
That's a little different, but a bad or a good person, yeah, there's a lot of gray.
Yeah, and also there, I mean, some of the Americans, the bad guys are spread out. It's international, so it's not just the Russians. So it's at home too. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, and you get a good sense of why.
Yeah.
Why? What's the motivation for the people who are doing what they're doing?
And even a Canadian in there. So.
And a Canadian to boot. So I'm trying to think if I hit all my questions, and also, oh, do you write in other genres?
No, I'm pretty much an in-genre reader and writer. Although I've been thinking about a short story that has a little romantic edge to it, but I've just been thinking about it. So
it hasn't come out of the mental phases yet.
Yeah, I know. It's like not there yet.
So do you think a short story will be more of a challenge for you to write than novels?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think people that can do short stories, that's just, to me, that's I can go on and on and on, but I can't cut.
So it's the lack of real estate.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the shortest place to go to. Well, I think right now short stories are really becoming popular.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, why do you think that is?
Well, it used to be that was a staple because if you read old magazines were just short stories,
Mhm.
I mean, because the New York, any of those magazines, and they've kind of gone downhill. So now I think it's being picked up by anthologies and stuff. Because I think there's always been a desire for short stories, something you can digest in a night.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Well, yeah, I think it's a time thing.
Yeah.
Who has time? I mean, I've gotten really so that my preferred way to read is to listen to books on tape,
Yeah.
because if I usually have a book in the car, and then I have on tape, and I have an actual physical book on my bedside that I'm reading, and it takes me 5 times as long to read the book at my bedside, because I get into bed, I pick up the book, I read 2 chapters, and I'm out.
Exactly.
It has nothing to do with how good the book is or
Yeah.
not. It's simply, at the end of the day, I'm bushed, and I'm prone, and I'm comfortable, and the house is quiet, and
Yeah.
night night.
Well, you ask about why short chapters, and that's exactly why I do that. Because I like to have short chapters so I can finish it in my bedside. So I want to finish that chapter at night. I close it, I'm done. Uh, that's why I like. They're kind of like short stories in each chapter, but
Well, you take me to a different place, like in the first chapter. Okay, this is where we are, and this is what's happening. And then the second chapter, this is where we are, and this is what's happening. And they're all connected. But Dover says attention span with TikTok is getting shorter. I also think that's part of it.
you got
Yeah,
something
our
to do.
attention,
Yeah.
Barbara Desmond said the same thing. Our attention span is gone,
Yeah.
is getting shorter and shorter. So it's getting more and more difficult to do that. Okay, so genres. Oh, do you want to talk a little bit about your other pursuits?
Well, let's see.
Travel, grandparenting,
Well, yeah, I
birding,
got got
wildlife photography. You finished touring all major league ballparks?
we just finished that this year. We started in 2012. I bought a car from a friend of mine who's got a dealership in Flint, Michigan, actually in Montrose, Michigan. A guy named Andy Susky. Bruce Jackson was on here. You'll know him. And I bought it from him. And my wife and I said, well, we hadn't seen the new Tiger Stadium. So we thought, well, let's go see Tiger Stadium. So we did that. And all of a sudden that whole thing evolved on our way all the way across country. We stopped in St. Louis. We lived in Kansas City, so we didn't need to see that park. Then we went to Dallas, or the Rangers Park. And then we went to Phoenix. And then we ended in the Angel Stadium, and then drove back up. And we thought, that's kind of fun. We did a little video at each park, and interviewed a person, and we tasted a little hot dog. And so over the course of the last 10 years, we've seen all the ballparks, and we were kind of holding out. My wife was kind of holding out on Houston, which was technically our last one, because that whole cheating scandal a couple of years ago, she was kind of protesting not seeing them, but we decided we had to go see them. So we went to Houston, and then in the interim, the Rangers built a new stadium, so we had to go up there to see so we actually have seen 31 stadiums, but one repeat because they closed the old one. But yeah, that's been a lot of fun, because we spent about 2 or 3 days in each city, and yeah, it's been a great hobby. But then we got the twin girl granddaughters, and then we got the 2 grandsons, and we try to alternate weekends watching them. But we do a lot of travel, and we're planning a trip to, this year it's mostly to conferences, but we're going to go back to Michigan in October for I can't believe it, my 55th high school reunion. So man, telling you,
TikTok, TikTok.
I went to school with a bunch of old people. I didn't realize it.
They all got older, but you didn't, right?
That's right. I'm still Peter Pan.
I thought they were
Absolutely.
all going to be 29.
Yeah, forever, forever. Okay,
Forever.
last question. Michael says, how many words do you use in an average chapter?
I would say 1,500, 2,000. Yeah, I'd say about that, around in that area. I said sometimes I'll get up, sometimes it'll be longer chapters when they're, but I try to keep the, you know, the long narratives with the technical stuff as short as I can, but those can be longer chapters. But yeah, probably I'd say, I don't think I've done much more than 3,000 words. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you wished I had?
What's the name of my latest agent?
You really want me to ask you that?
No, no, I'll just go to bed sad.
Ah, okay, well, I think I don't see any more questions in the chat, and I have had just the best time talking with Rick. If you have not checked out his book, do so. It's a great read. You will really enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a great read. You will. He's doing the Carol Merrill School presentation.
Yeah,
It's a great read. So check out the book. And spend some time reading Rick's Brainchild, and then you'll be ready for book 2 and book 3 when they come out. This has been really lovely, and I am going to turn it back to Claire.